You mentioned that you had roots in Santa Clara County.
Yes.
Where was the first vineyard?
Yes. So as we say, my people came from Piemonte in northwest Italy. They were like most of our people. They were poor peasants, you know, but they had been making wine for literally hundreds of years in the little town of Castelnuovo Don Bosco. And so in 1890, my great-grandfather, as we'd say, bisnonno, and his eldest child, Filippo, got on a ship out of Le Havre, France, and sailed to New York, took a train immediately to we call Silicon Valley now. Then it was called Mountain View, right? And the country's largest winery was called Casa Delmas. And no one's heard of Casa Delmas because it disappeared. But
I've heard of Delmas Street.
Okay, so the street named after this this French family. So Casa Delmas.
Okay.
Was the name of the winery. The largest winery at the time. We could call it the Gallo Winery of 1890. And they had a letter of introduction because that helped you, you know, to get through through New York. And they went immediately to work for this Casa Delmas winery in Mountain View. And back then, of course, Santa Clara Valley was known as Santa Clara Valley, the Heart's Delight, as they said, the Valley of the Heart's Delight, and later be known as Silicon Valley, but full of vineyards, full of prune orchards, apricots, nurseries, plums, everything you can imagine with all that great soil and sunshine that you know well about.
What made your family, well, first of all, you're the third or
well, I count the fourth generation because if I go to my great-grandfather, then in the mountains we talk about, I'm part of the fourth generation, and my children who are interested in the business, they haven't come back yet, I keep praying, but they would be part of the fifth generation.
Oh, I'm sure that this is just spectacular here. When you were in Santa Clara County, you moved south, and then eventually...
Well, there was a stop in between. So they worked at Casa Delmas. The bisnonno, Giuseppe, went back to Italy. But then his son Filippo went to San Francisco and opened a winery in San Francisco. So now they got a little established in California.
Whereabouts?
Went to North Beach. North Beach, you guessed it right, you know, with all the Italians there. And the city was full of European immigrants, and they needed wine. And they were on Columbus Street, very close to Columbus Street.
That's amazing.
Yes, and we have pictures, and they had a brand, and they had the big tanks there.
Well, you mean they brought the grapes from...
Okay, good question as well. So they weren't grown in San Francisco.
No.
And according to my aunt, who was the son of Filippo, they used to bring them in on rail cars from Santa Clara Valley. Made sense. They're not going to bring them from Napa because there was no bridge, you know, but they could bring them up the train into San Francisco.
And that's where you crushed.
Yes, and they fermented.
I have to tell you, my grandfather was a grape broker. And I believe, I think he brought the grapes from Napa, Santa Elena to North Beach too.
It's possible.
And
you would have had to bring them around.
I don't know how they got them.
Yes.
But they brought the grapes to maybe by boat. I don't know.
Maybe by barge. It'd be harder.
And they would sell them to Italians who made wine in their cellars.
Right.
So you have that whole clientele tradition.
The name of the winery in San Francisco, owned by the Bargetto family, is a curious name. It's called South Montebello Vineyard and Winery Company. It's an ambitious name. Montebello is a name tied to the Santa Cruz Mountains. You know, Ridge Montebello is world famous, and Ridge was founded by an Italian physician. And so in my mind and imagination, I wondered if, because the grapes were coming from Santa Clara Valley and Santa Cruz Mountains, and who knows, maybe Montebello, they may have used that name. So I don't have that as a fact, but the name gives us a clue about where the grapes were coming from, their ties to the South Bay.
Okay, so I know Montebello Road, and I know Ridge, and I know the other Pichetti.
Yeah,
Pichetti Winery.
Yeah, but the physician is this physician named it Montebello, beautiful mountain. This is like in the 1875, 1880s. Yeah, he was in San Francisco, He was a San Francisco physician who went down there. So the ties are there. Mm-hmm. So that remains a little family mystery.
So then you transition to, I think, God's country.
Okay, so then Prohibition was looming.
Yes.
So they ran this winery from about 1910 to about 1916, 1917. Prohibition was looming. They closed down San Francisco and they moved to the little town of Soquel, the lumber town.
Yes.
Because one of their sisters, Angelina, was married to a lumberman. Okay.
Oh.
And that's why she was living in Soquel. And then when she starts talking about her brothers, they need to get out of San Francisco. And she said, you know, venite voi a Soquel, è bellissimo. And the town is beautiful, sunny, you know, beautiful weather. And then they bought a ranch on the up above what is today Bargetto Winery.
What did they grow? Because during Prohibition, I guess you could have, well, you had wine, you had grapes, but they were used for different purposes.
And grapes were not the biggest priority during Prohibition because, you know, but what they did, they had 50 acres, and so they planted, and Soquel was famous for cherries back then. Cherries.
Oh, okay.
So they had some cherries, but they had mainly plums. They had plums and cherries with a little bit of grapes on the ranch.
And then did you transition to grapes later? You know, I had always heard of Bargetto wineries, and they were known for their fruit wines at some time.
Oh, you would have to bring that up, right?
Well, but I know Bargetto.
That's from our indiscriminate past, yes.
Why?
So, well, my father...
Because maybe you made them with cherries. And,
my father made them from a lot of different
But that's
fruits.
amazing.
And ironically, the very first one my dad experimented with in the 1960s was plum wine, okay, because there was plums on the ranch.
Yes.
It didn't come from the ranch. But this area, Santa Cruz, as we overlook, you know, Watsonville, Corralitos area, this area full of beautiful apricots and plums and blackberries and alala berries in the old days. So yes, my father made all sorts of fruit wines in the old days. We don't produce those anymore, and we've evolved to estate Pinot Noir.
Oh, Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But why don't we go back to my grandfather's time for a minute and give him a little credit, and I have a few things to show you.
Okay. Now,
okay, do you want me to keep going?
Let me just ask you this.
Oh.
Was your grandfather responsible for the move to Soquel, or that was after?
Yes, the brothers together
With
left
your aunt.
Soquel.
Yeah,
So
okay.
the brother, and we'll get to the co-founders of Bargetto Winery, Philip Bargetto, and Johnny Bargetto. So they would have left San Francisco together as brothers, and with their wives from the same hometown, moved to Soquel, bought the property in about 1920, and we've remained there ever since.
Okay.
So more than 100 years.
I'm going to do some scanning right now.
Okay. You want to take a little break?
Yeah. Well, it's not going to be a break.
Oh, you just keep
I'm
going.
just going to.
Okay, so yeah. Why don't you come here?
This is beautiful.
You want to come here? What?
Yeah.
And you can scan, and we see the Santa Cruz Mountains.
Okay.
That's Mount Madonna up there. And then we have Regan.
Yeah.
This is our Italian section. We're growing Dolcetto here. It might be a nice shot just to see what Dolcetto looks like.
I don't think I'm going to see the grape.
Well,
It's pretty laden right now. Is that a late grape or is just the season late?
The whole thing is late. This is the latest start ever.
No, but normally this is late. I mean,
today's October 4 today, right?
Yes, yeah.
4.
You would have crushed.
We haven't picked one cluster.
Oh, wow.
We haven't picked one cluster. Some years we're 60% done.
Okay.
So record late. And that just goes to the cool spring. Okay, but if you want to sweep around, so you see Dolcetto growing, you see the vineyard here, and now
what is
we look around.
Dolcetto approximately like?
So Dolcetto comes from the hometown. My people would have made Dolcetto. Dolcetto de Alba and Dolcetto di Asti are the two DOCG wines, the high-end Italian wines. Okay. And it's a medium-bodied, fruity wine. But when it's grown here, it develops some complexity and interest, and it goes into a blend that we call La Vita. La Vita is our Italian blend.
That's your all Italian. That's amazing.
Yes, yeah. And as you sweep around, you're into our Chardonnay section. That's our reserve Chardonnay section there.
What's the difference?
And
older vines?
Well, not so much that. They're two different clones of Chardonnay.
Oh, okay.
But we put bird netting there to protect it.
I saw that.
It works. It's very, very effective.
Well, what about the birds with the other grapes?
What I tell people is, fortunately, birds have bird brains, and they're not courageous and smart enough to fly that far, and they're afraid of the hawks out here. Oh, cool. So they'll come in 100 yards, but they won't come in much further.
But I guess I never appreciated hawks before.
Right. They help indirectly protect our crop. And this is Nebbiolo growing here.
Oh, wow.
Nebbiolo.
That's the classic.
Yeah. Well, when
Northern
you're here, Ken, I'll
Italian.
introduce you to a few things I brought along since you're part of the Historical Society. All right. So this is my grandfather's wine thief from the 1940, hand blown, totally functional. You know, we have to sample the wine barrels, you know, through the bunghole. You know what that is. So here's this. All right. And then I brought an old bottle, 1946 vintage Moscato d'Oro, one of our older bottles.
Wow.
All right. And then I even brought...
have you ever tasted any of it?
Yeah. So on my 60th birthday, I brought about 8 wines for the family to try. The best one was this one that aged the...
Wow, you keep it really... It's airtight.
Yeah, well, it's fortified wine, so it's higher alcohol, so it ages better.
Okay.
In addition, I brought you my grandfather's wooden bocce balls that he brought in the 1920s to the property. And here's the Palino, you know the Palino.
Yes, yeah.
And here's the wooden, and you can even see a little color. So, you know, you got red on one, you got orange on the other, you got blue.
I noticed that the Polino, those older, are a little bigger than the Polinos you see at Campo de Bocce and other places.
Yeah, but the idea is it's smaller than the big ones, so you can see it.
Yeah, it's the whole thing.
And then finally, this is a gift from me to you, all right, the Great Prohibition Caper, bootlegging in SoCal. It captures the family's best story about what we were doing during Prohibition. So I'm going to send you home with this.
Oh, you know that we have an archival library at the Italian American Heritage.
There you go.
So I'm going to put that in our library after I look at it, of course.
Perfect.
Okay, this is.
We take a 1-minute break.
Sure. Okay, we got it.
Okay, you ready? You good?
Yep.
So it shows red on there. Does that mean live?
Yes.
With the red button on the front.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ken, let's go back to Prohibition. And like we were saying, that was tough times for the winemakers, 14 years. And they did their very best to survive during that time. As I said before, each household was allowed to make 200 gallons for home consumption. So the family was creative. Of course, they were good cooks. My grandmother and her sister, Francesca. And the local dignitaries knew they could come and get a nice dinner of homemade raviolis and polenta, and it would have been kind of the leaders of the community, the police chief and the fire chief and educators and these sorts of people that would come for dinner. Well, what the family did is they incorporated wine with the dinners. So if you just wanted dinner, you could have just ravioli. Okay, whatever they were serving. But if you wanted a glass of wine or a bottle of wine, now you paid more. So it's like they were running a restaurant and it was part of the meal.
Absolutely.
When we talk about Prohibition, we're not talking about, Al Capone in Chicago murdering people. We're talking about serving some wine, and they would sell people a few bottles, or a gallon to take home with them. But they did have an old horse barn on the property that would later on become the winery, and there they made extra barrels, and they sold some wine as well. So, but the best story is in that little short story that I gave you, which I call historical fiction. Is based on a real, true story of getting busted by the revenuers, as they would call them, out of San Francisco on one famous night. And so you can read about it.
I will. I didn't know that they would come all the way from San Francisco to the country, way out in SoCal.
Yes.
Are they crazy?
It's a good point. And it made the papers, and there was about 9 different stops So they started up in
Ridiculous.
Boulder Creek. So imagine starting in Boulder Creek and Felton and Santa Cruz.
That's
and then they said the
amazing.
last stop was, of course, they misspelled it, Baguetta place,
Good.
SoCal. And that's where they found wine. But
Now, let me ask you, too, because there was another historic date that I collect data on, too. During World War II, Italian-born citizens who weren't Italian-borns who were not U.S. citizens were considered enemy aliens. Did that impact your family at all?
No.
Okay.
No. My grandfather had become a U.S.
So
citizen
then it wasn't
as
an
Philip.
issue.
So they were totally secure, and it was kind of the opposite because my Uncle Ralph, who was a young man, he was, 18, 19 years old when the war broke out, so he got drafted
Yes.
and went and served in the European theater in Patton's army. So he served the nation.
So he
But-
served in
World War II.
in Northern Europe, more Belgium, and
and
they didn't
Belgium, Germany, and the Battle of the Bulge.
Yes, that's what. If you said Patton, that
Yeah,
would be the battle.
and he was in an armored division in Europe called the Black Cat
Okay.
division. So, yes.
So that kind of connects it. Now, you had told me, we were talking just now too about this new line of wines that you're promoting.
Yes, okay.
From Santa Cruz appellation.
Oh yeah. So we'll get to my new brand in a few minutes, but let me just kind of discuss a little bit. So then we come to the end of Prohibition, right? So it's December 5, 1933. And as you can imagine, they had some wine and some extra barrels on the property. So they stayed up all night long bottling the wine and putting the labels on. But they were poor. And I remind people that economists teach us that in March of 1933 was the absolute bottom of the Depression. So the stock market crashed in 29. So in March of 33. So in December, just a few months later, that's when Prohibition was repealed, and that's when they got started. They had no excess money, and as my uncle would tell the story, they used flour and water to affix the labels onto the bottles because they did not even have glue to use. So that tells you, what a humble start, and little by little. But what they were is they were winemakers, as I say, but they believed in the quality of this area. This is what we call appellation. They didn't use that name in the old days.
Yeah.
Viticultural area or appellation. They believed in Santa Cruz Mountains, the cool climate for really making exquisite wines. And they were way ahead of the waves because Americans were not drinking wine in 1933. They were drinking cream sherry and whiskey and beer and who knows what else. It wouldn't be until the 1970s that really the wine boom, took off, but that was decades later. But they got started very modestly, and now 90 years later, my family and I continue to operate Bargetto Winery in SoCal. This vineyard, Regan Vineyards, that you've seen today, has really been a turning point because this has become our estate vineyard, and it's where we're growing all these ultra premium grapes so we can make these wonderful Pinot Noirs, Chardonnay, Merlot, this Italian blend that we call La Vita, made from these Italian varietals, including the Nebbiolo. And so it's really allowed us to evolve and grow as a winery, and now it gives us a chance to share these fine wines with wine lovers all
Well,
over.
it truly is an amazing experience, and it really ties into roots, no pun intended.
Yes.
But I mean, this
Yes.
gazebo is in the heart of a 360-degree view, but it's surrounded by vineyards and just as far as your eye can see. It's interesting when you drive up here, you're seeing berry farms, you're seeing
And apples.
and all. Then you make a turn up here and you go up
Right.
this hill and you're in a whole different
Right.
vineyard. You're in the vineyards.
It's a little bit like a secret garden.
It is a secret. That's a
can't
good
see-
word.
You
Yes.
can't see it from Green
You
Valley
can't.
Road. We're up on top of a knoll here, And I'm so happy that we bought this now 32 years ago. It was an old apple orchard. We pulled out all the apple trees. And it's a spectacular view and has been a blessing. Farming, Ken, and you know this, you probably have known farmers, maybe your family farming, is hard work. It's hard work. We deal with nature. We deal with slides that we're working on today. We deal with smoke taint threat that we had in the 2020.
Yeah.
We don't know what's happening tomorrow.
Absolutely.
All I know is we're just a few days away from the beginning of this harvest, 2023. We got heat this week, okay, today and through the weekend, so we're very blessed.
Where do you age your wines?
So all the wines
Yeah.
are produced in SoCal, California at Bargetto Winery.
Okay.
They're all produced there, they're aged there. And we have a nice tasting room there, open 7 days a week. So I invite people to come to Bargetto Winery. We have daily tours Monday through Friday.
Where is that located now?
So it's at 3535 North Main Street in SoCal. We've been in the same spot, as I say, for more than 100 years, with the winery operating for 90 years this year.
Okay. Well, that's really good to know in terms of that.
Can I tell you about my latest thing?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to hear about.
All right. So my latest thing is just like you're, enjoying the view, and I've been coming out here for 32 years.
You don't get tired of this view.
We wanted to share this experience with wine lovers. So I said, all right, how about I develop my little baby brand, Regan, named in honor of my mother. So the vineyard is named in honor of my mother, and then we named the wine in honor of the vineyard and Mom, Regan Vineyards Winery. This is small production. We produce maybe 60 or 70 cases of wine, 4 different wines: Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Merlot, and we have a new Nebbiolo, and you might get a kick out of it. Nebbiolo is in reference to the significant fog they get in Piemonte during October harvest time.
Oh, good. I wondered about that.
So we called the wine, not Nebbiolo only, that's the subtitle, but we call it the Great Fog. So the label reads the Great Fog. And we have that for tasting as well. So it's kind of a fun, and we're honoring our Italian tradition. I thought you would appreciate that.
I do appreciate that, because I often wondered why they called it Nebbiolo.
Yes.
Because Nebbio means cloudy or something.
La nebbia is fog. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
And, I've been in this business for a few years. In my whole life, I've never come across one grape varietal named in honor of the weather. So somebody, 500 years ago, some old Italian decided, it's always foggy in October. We call it Nebbiolo,
That's
the big fog.
Exactly.
So then we call it the Great
Maybe
Fog.
they can plant some around South San Francisco.
That's too cold. That's too cold.
Yeah.
But we have a good balance out here because, we're just 6.9 miles from the ocean. We get fog in the morning, keeps us cool, perfect for Pinot Noir and delicious Chardonnay and the rest. But then it burns off 9:30, 10 o'clock this morning, no fog.
Okay, just in terms of terroir,
Yeah.
the Gilroy area is almost distinct. You've got the Santa Cruz area here, which is kind of its own thing, and then you've got the south, the Monterey plantings, which are different as well. So there's so much variety here.
Yes, and wines are a reflection of where they're grown. You use that good French word, terroir. And
I can't pronounce it.
It's hard to say, I know. But it captures all the uniqueness of each site. Like that wine is a reflection of somewhereness. It's coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's a reflection of the sun and how the sun arrives there, of the soil, the temperature, everything that we do in the vineyard as far as canopy management. So it's all captured in that word. We here at Regan, as I say, we're cool climate. That's what is unique to us. Gilroy is a wonderful wine growing area. It's warmer over there. So for Cabernet, Zinfandel, Charbono, it's done very well. In fact, we're buying some Cabernet from a grower this year for the first time in Gilroy. I'm excited to get it. But we're cool climate, and we're one of the coolest sites in all of California. And even with climate change, I tell people that we're blessed because we're influenced by the Pacific Ocean. And that deep canyon is called the Marianas Gulch, if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
And it's super deep in the middle of the Monterey Bay. And that's cold, churning water that will keep the water cold, keep the air cold, keep us cool. And so we'll be able to continue to produce these exquisite wines, I believe,
Oh,
into the future.
that brings up. So most of these wineries, I mean, most of your products are estate grown.
Yes.
That's also very challenging
Yes.
because
right. Now, in the case of Regan, all these wines are estate, and at Bargetto Winery in SoCal, all of our high-end reserve wines are going to be coming from Regan, so you'll see Regan on the label too.
Okay.
And if you don't mind me giving a little plug, if your people want to come out for wine tasting,
Yes.
we only go through the first Sunday in November, and then we close down for the winter time. But it's reganwinery.com, so REGAN winery.com. And Ken, you have one of my cards, so you have it there. And of
Yep,
course, you'll
I
be
do.
my guest. You'll be my guest when you decide to come out.
Okay. Well, I think, what more could I say except what a fascinating experience, plus the tradition that I think goes back 4 generations. And it really, to me, is, I'm also impressed by your linkage to your ancestral land in terms of your knowledge and heritage.
Right.
And it just shows how powerful sometimes culture and
Yes,
traditions
yeah.
are.
And
You really have just brought all of this together. It's like a
Thank
symphony.
You. No, thank you for appreciating that. And a little bit more than 10 years ago, I decided to get the history down. Now, this is just a short story I give
Yes.
you today, but I wrote what we call the Big Book 10 years ago, and I wanted to capture our history before it was gone because no one else in the family was going to do it. So I have the Big Book in SoCal at the winery, and now I dove in and did a lot of research on the family, and I kind of cemented my deeper understanding about our roots, our time in Italy, and all sorts of details.
Well, I'm
along
sure
the
it
way.
goes back centuries. I mean,
Yes,
just.
yes.
But the other thing is, you mentioned at the winery they have a lot of the historical photos, and are they at
Yes,
the?
yes.
So I'll have
and
to
you're
take-
welcome to stop by. Now they open at noon. So if for some reason on your way back you want to stop at Bargetto Winery about 11:45, Nancy, our manager, will be there. She'll show you some other pictures. She'll show you the book. She'll show you the labels, some old equipment, historical
Okay.
equipment. So you're welcome to go by and see her.
Okay, maybe I'm going to try to plot this out.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Well,
Okay,
thank you.
Grazie a
Salute.
te. Grazie a te. Huh?